China is so big, so impossibly huge that it makes the United Kingdom seem like a toy version of a country by comparison. A monstrous nation that would fit our small island inside nearly 40 times over and containing 20 times as many people. They created paper and printing, gunpowder and the compass. Despite 2,000 years of technology advances, the Great Wall is still the only single man-made structure to be seen from space. Why would I choose to live in China for a year? Isn't that enough? Culturally, China varies greatly from the West. These differences have had an impact upon my learning and teaching experiences and will shape not only how I complete my third year, but also the rest of my life. This year has given me an opportunity to view another side of life, has given me an appreciation for my own culture in contrast to that of the Chinese, and some of these thoughts I can now share. For my enhancement year, I decided to go to Hangzhou in China. This is the fourth largest city in China, and Zhejiang University has strong links to Coventry. I thought this would be a good way of experiencing new culture and widening my horizons. Although my knowledge of China was initially very small, I was aware that China is one of the oldest civilizations existing in the world. I also knew that the Great Wall was built to protect the country from outsiders and that the Forbidden City was home to China's emperors. A rich cultural heritage and ancient wonders had a definite appeal. My awareness of China has increased with recent events. For instance, China hosting the Olympic Games. Despite this, my knowledge of China was spread very, very thin in some areas, and I felt that this year would provide me with a better experience of China instead of what the books might tell me. Nothing can compare to an experience of being there in person. Coming to China as a foreigner is a bit like being a film star. Many of the people have never seen a real-life foreigner in person, and this can lead to being treated rather like a celebrity, such as having photographs taken and a general buzz around you. This was the first thing I noticed within minutes of walking in the street. Lots of people will either ask for a photo or take one without me realising. It really is like being a celebrity here, and because I have such light hair, I do stand out and get spotted a mile off. Another thing that I noticed was that Chinese are hugely interested in you as a person. They are keen to learn about Western cultures, and common questions can include which country are you from and what are you doing in China. Quite often they will ask you how long you are staying for, or what do you think of China so far, but often this depends on how well they speak English or how well I can understand their Mandarin. Just like in the UK, and unsurprisingly, people from different cities or towns speak different dialects. China as a country is working hard to move forward. There is a push to develop from its wholly traditional ways and come into a more Western way of working. I feel that although it has a long way to go yet, they are still making good progress, meeting their need to keep pace with the other competitive nations without losing the long connection to China's rich heritage. Upon my arrival, the first bridge I needed to cross was that of communication. In China, how they communicate is very different from in the UK, and therefore quite alien to my past experiences. I found that a lot of the time I needed patience with sorting things out. For instance, negotiating refunds. The Chinese have an elevated bureaucracy to an art form. Experiences in this area speak volumes on the culture clash between Chinese way of doing things and what I'm used to doing. One example is from when I was sorting out my refund for my travel. I was required to collect an approval form and hand it in at the finance office. I was told to speak to a specific person, but on arrival she was not there, so a colleague told me to return in the next week. When I did, I spoke to her and she was really confused. Despite being sat in the same room, the same person I had spoken to had not passed on any information. From my experience in China, this type of situation is far from common. In British culture, it would be seen as extremely rude and obstructive behaviour, but here not so. I think it relates at least partially to the hierarchy structure within China. He wasn't deliberately trying to make trouble. It was just that he did not see it within his job role to perform the action of passing on the message to the subordinate. If anything, he probably expected me to do it. In China, status is important, as with anywhere, but social interactions are much more governed by status than in the UK. Experiences in China clearly show the effect of this social structure as it functions within the workplace. discovered that, unlike Britain, where a manager will become intimately acquainted with his team, in China the person above you is the person you need to remember. Those below you, although important, are not the people that you need to consider at any depth. It's just a part of how the workplace has always been here, that you know who's above, not equal or beneath your job role. This became very evident when I was speaking to my department manager, who had to introduce himself and seemed unhappy that I was not aware of who he was, by reputation alone. I had to politely explain that I was unable to recognise him and that, being new to the country, I was still getting used to his Chinese name. It can be very hard to understand sometimes what is going on, but once you comprehend where you are in the hierarchy, it gives you a starting point. Knowing this and understanding the system can be very positive, as in theory you only need to approach one person to get things done. China has been a steep learning curve from day one, not least because of the language barrier. There have been noticeable differences in the experiences that I have drawn from semester 1 and 2 relating to the learning and the language. I found that I enjoyed teaching a lot. My students were lovely, and I found that once I started to understand cultural differences and adapt to their way of working, they got more from my lessons and it was easier to teach. I found the more I explained myself using different types of language, the more I was able to catch bits that they understood and were able to answer and use. Introducing new key vocabulary for them became absolutely key to getting them to talk more during my lessons. During semester 1, I was teaching in a primary school, ages 8 to 10. These students were able to integrate verbal and non-verbal communication, learning essentially to play charades to aid in communication, a basic language development strategy. In comparison, students from the university in semester 2 were much less inclined to respond to this. If they were unable to understand my speaking, then they wouldn't try with body movements and would detach from the learning. They were concerned about that this behaviour could be childish and also that they could be seen to not understand. Losing face by appearing foolish in behaviour or not understanding is unacceptable to Chinese students. They would rather not try than attempt and fail. The accepted view for many Westerners is that mistakes are inevitable, but learning opportunities in direct opposition to this right first time are not at all doctrine. In one lesson, a discussion on favourite music, some students were unsure how to say certain words, so they chose not to say anything. Even when pressed directly, they would shake their heads and just refuse to speak. It became evident to me that language barriers can be a very hard part of living in a different culture such as China. The older the person, the less likely they are to speak English, as Westernization has been a very gradual and relatively recent process in China. With my knowledge of Mandarin being very basic, language barriers came up all the time, especially in taxis. One incident that stands out was I was trying to meet friends downtown. My big mistake was not really being aware of where I was going. I got into a taxi, repeated where I was told to go, but my taxi driver was unsure. He was trying to ask me where was it near or can I direct him. Unfortunately, I was unable to answer these questions due to my basic Mandarin. I was only ever able to understand but not answer. I tried to do what I do usually with the children and use my body language to point where I was going, but he did not wish to try to understand. The only resolution was using my mobile to contact somebody who could translate for me. The driver would not engage me in case he made a mistake. The enhancement year has geared me up for my third and final year in ways I could not imagine. Firstly, I feel it has given me a fuller appreciation of language barriers and communication, especially between those I am submitting work for, those who are working with me. Previously I have kept to myself, but now I see that a breakdown in communication can make life very difficult for those around me. As a result, I will definitely strive to reach for help and make sure I have regular communication with what's going on for my assignments. Next year is very important that I remove all barriers and have open lines of communication. China is not only a place that has a hierarchy, as before I really didn't notice one within my own country. Now I understand that I should look for the invisible lines of power in all situations, see where I fit within them and respect the structures in place. The year has taught me that I need to be aware of who is above me, as they can offer help that I will need throughout my year. I have gained more of an appreciation for making mistakes, and that making them is completely fine so long as you learn from them. I will encourage myself to take that leap of faith and make it possible mistake, because in the long run it will better my understanding and guide my choices better. My experiences in China have taught me about the country and the people, but also about myself.